I didn't see any point in my life, and it was more like I was calmly planning, you know, I don't know. It was like less anxiously planning how I would exit the situation. You know, it wasn't, I didn't see anything to live for, and I really was very, very depressed. And it was
Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm DC. Today I'm speaking with Rebecca Johnson. She is a remarkable young woman who, while studying for her PhD, was diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis. Obviously doing a PhD would be difficult enough, but doing it with MS would be incredibly difficult. And the fact that she finished it is a true testament to strength. I found it quite remarkable. She changed her entire lifestyle, moved country. She moved from the UK to Spain, and it was there she discovered carnivore diet. And since then has had a remarkable turnaround. She's gone from living in a wheelchair and being in a degenerative condition that, well, she had no hope for the future, to now thriving and living a normal, healthy life, homesteading, in fact. So it is a remarkable story, and I hope you enjoy this one. So I'll let you listen to it in her own words. Okay, so Rebecca, tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us who you are.
Well, thanks for inviting me on your channel, first of all. My name's Rebecca. I'm 44 years old, and well, my background is I used to live a completely different life. I'm now living in a rural area in northern Spain and looking to rear my own animals and sort of go into farming and homesteading. But 10 years ago, I was about to launch into a high-level career in academia. I was finishing my PhD, and I was living in Manchester in the UK, very much a city girl, and very, very busy life, and very healthy, actually, although my diet was not very healthy, but I just had loads of energy, and I didn't really have any health conditions. So I didn't really think about my health whatsoever. And I think I just pushed my body as far as it would go in terms of what stress levels and socializing and just throwing myself into everything. And then one day it all changed because I had a few days of nausea and dizziness, which I thought was a virus or something, or maybe just extreme exhaustion from pushing myself too far and my workload. And I couldn't drive for a few days, and it was a little bit worrying. And then I mentioned it to my father, who is a retired doctor, and he asked me, do you have double vision? And I said, no, I'm just dizzy. But then a few hours later, the dizziness settled down into double vision. So I text messaged him. I said, oh, actually, I've got double vision now, thinking nothing of it. And he was extremely concerned at that point, and he knew that that could potentially be a brain tumor, or if not, multiple sclerosis. So he urged me to go to a doctor, and I went to an eye hospital, which was opposite the campus where I was studying and teaching. And they admitted me that night for a CT scan to check for a brain tumor. So this was the first moment where it started sinking in. This could be something serious. I had no idea. And it thankfully came back negative for the tumor. But then they asked me to stay in for another 5 days so they could give me an MRI scan to check for demyelination, which is a sign of multiple sclerosis. And that came back positive. So that was the first I heard of multiple sclerosis being potentially in my life. And obviously it was very concerning, but I just decided to carry on as much as I could as normal. And the diagnostic procedure took about 8 months. So during that time, they were giving me further tests and MRI scans. trying to rule out other conditions. And they also wanted to check, they knew it was probably going to be multiple sclerosis, but they wanted to check what type of multiple sclerosis. So the nerve in my eye had failed. That's why I had double vision. So because of the demyelination in my brain, that's the nerve, that's the myelin sheathing around the nerve fibers in the brain. So what happens with MS, the immune system attacks that myelin sheathing, and you could have nerve failure anywhere in your body for that reason. And in my case, it was my eye. And so one eye was looking in a different direction to the other, hence the double vision. And they were now testing to see if that would repair itself, because when the nerve repairs itself, that's relapsing remitting MS. If it doesn't, it's primary progressive. So then it was the next sort of scary hurdle to jump through, which MS is it? Hopefully it's relapsing remitting. And it was. So the nerve started to repair itself. But during that time, the symptoms of MS started to hit me very, very hard. So that was fatigue, brain fog. And this was while I was trying to finish my PhD. So I think that was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but I managed to do it. I handed in my PhD, had to extend by 6 months, but I managed to hand it in. And it was after that point, because I think that had been sort of keeping me with some kind of purpose to strive for. But after I handed in the PhD, I completely crashed, and I crashed for like 2 or 3 years. I never really recovered from that, the impact of the symptoms for 2 or 3 years. I was always expecting, next week I'll just rest for this week, and then next week I'll be able to do things. And it just never happened. It was every single day, always the same. I might have a less bad day, but then on that less bad day, I would try and do something, some kind of activity, and then there'd be a massive fatigue payback, and I would just be pushed back onto the sofa. So anyone who has neurological fatigue will know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like a straitjacket, and it's impossible to see from the outside. So people often don't take it seriously, or don't believe you when you claim to be disabled by it, but it's completely disabling. And you may look like you can do a certain activity, but the payback is not seen. So, and something as simple as taking the dog for a walk can knock you out for a week if you have it bad. And not just physical symptoms, but the brain fog. I mean, this was, again, completely incapacitating. And I was, previous to this, I had been on top of my game. I'd been doing my PhD. I was multilingual because my field is translation studies. So, I'm a real talker and communicator, and I couldn't string a sentence together. I couldn't remember the conversation long enough to be able to participate in it. It was like sand through my fingers.
I understand how that feels. It's horrible.
Yeah.
After my transplant, I was very much the same. Yeah.
Did you? Yeah. It's hard to understand unless you've experienced it, isn't it?
Yeah. People don't understand that when you say that you go through these difficulties where you couldn't speak properly, or you couldn't think properly, you couldn't remember the conversation. Like by the end of the sentence, or halfway through, you couldn't even remember what you were talking about.
Yeah.
It's very hard to understand unless you've actually experienced that. And you know that it's happening, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah, that's it. It's not like you're not aware. You're very aware, and you're very aware. This isn't me. Please don't think I'm pretending. Please don't think this is me. Don't think that I'm this stupid or that.
Exactly.
It's so hard to just live your life and be yourself and fulfill your potential. And you're so aware of that it's heartbreaking. I found it heartbreaking. And actually, during these few years when I was at my worst, I was living alone. So I was usually alone for most of it. I was very much isolated, same 4 walls every day.
It's very hard to take as well.
Yeah.
So why did it take so long for you to get your diagnosis then? Like from the start of your test was 8 months.
Yeah. Well, apparently this is normal for multiple sclerosis. I mean, I have actually heard of cases through my YouTube channel. I have lots of people contact me who have chronic illnesses, and I have heard of people being diagnosed within a month. But as far as I was told, this was completely normal because they were because the medication is so expensive and you're on it for life. They want to make sure that it's MS and not a one-off event, which is called clinically isolated syndrome, or another condition that might resemble MS. So they usually wait for a second relapse to diagnose you of nerve failure. But in my case, because I think that they changed the legislation or the protocol, and the thinking had become get people on medication ASAP, because that will help them more in the long run. The earlier they're on the medication, but more benefits there'll be. So I think that they kind of rush diagnosed me because I never did have a second relapse of of nerve failure. I had further symptoms. I had the onset of symptoms that were disabling, and then another MRI scan that showed further demyelination activity. And so they based it on that. They decided to diagnose me on the basis of that. And I think I was heading for another relapse. I was on a downhill trend. I was using a wheelchair. I was absolutely incapacitated, as I say, from fatigue and brain fog, aches and pains. You know, it was like my rib cage I was like an 85-year-old woman. Everything felt delicate and heavy and difficult. And so I was on a downward trajectory, and I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't started taking my health back into my own hands. Oh, I haven't mentioned I was also put on medication. So they put me on medication at the point that they diagnosed me. So the nerve failure happened in April 2016. And the official diagnosis was in, I think, January of 2017. And then immediately I was put on daily injectables. It was Copaxone. And that's a lower level MS drug. That's like an entry level MS drug. And it was absolutely horrible. And the higher level drugs have incrementally worse side effects. Like the highest level can actually result in death. But Copaxone.
A lot of the medications they put us on are kind of like a catch-22, really, aren't they? Like they pretty much tell you if you don't take it, you're going to die. But if you do take it, eventually you're going to die anyway. Like it's going to kill you.
I found it horrifying and on some level unacceptable. I knew I had to accept, or I thought I had to accept it. I accepted my illness. I actually found that quite easy to accept on a philosophical level. You know, I didn't feel so much, why me? I felt like, why not me? Everybody gets sick. You know, it's something that is part of the human condition. Why shouldn't that happen to me? I didn't put it down to diet or lifestyle. I didn't know what caused it, but I just thought, well, I can't change it, so I have to accept it. Little did I know I could change it. Back then, I didn't think I had much choice. And then with the medication, it was just, it just seemed that was harder to accept because it wasn't even helping my symptoms. They weren't telling me, oh, if you take this medication, you'll feel better. No, you're going to feel a whole lot worse because these injections are extremely painful and they're every single day. And it's not the injection itself that hurts, but the product inside you, especially if you don't have much fat on your body. And I was following a diet for MS, which eliminated all saturated fats. Which again, I now look back on and I just think, what? If I'd had the basic information, like I would have done the opposite. But because I didn't have much fat on my body, I had only 4 injection sites as opposed to the normal 8. My upper body, my arms were too skinny, so I couldn't inject there. It was too painful. The fattier your body is, the less the injection hurt. So I was having to inject like in my hips and my buttocks, like the areas that had the most fat. And because I had to rotate around just 4 injection sites, I was getting skin site reactions. So I've still got scars on my hips from that time. And really, it was quite traumatizing, you know, thinking I have to do this now every single day for the rest of my life. And it's
pretty
not
scary, isn't it? I agree. It's when they tell you that this medication is only going to make you worse, and you're only going to need more and more of it the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And that's what they're telling you.
The thing I found most disgusting,
I think that's the worst part of it.
Well, I was about to say, I think personally, the thing that I found most disgusting about it is knowing that somebody out there is lining their pockets from this.
Yeah.
That I found very hard to swallow, that somebody out there is happy that I'm on these drugs for life because they're making a whole load of money off these drugs, which shouldn't come into it. But it
that's right.
Did. It came into, like, that, I don't know if that was the thing that wasn't what made me stop taking the drugs, but I was very aware that, this situation isn't in my interest. It didn't, I had to, because what they were saying is it might slow the progression of your disease in the long run. They weren't saying it's going to cure it. It was like sort of up to a 15 or 20% chance that it might slow the progression of the disease. But you don't even know if it has done in your case, because you can't compare your case to somebody else's. So it was like, I don't know if I have anything to go on here.
I think that was actually one of the biggest things about my condition too, is that they told me that this was it for the rest of my life. This is as good as it gets, and it's only going to get worse from here, and you're only going to need more and more medications for the rest of your life. Not that they had a very long time for me to live, but that was probably one of the worst parts of it, I think. And I agree. Like the injections, I was bruises, just all over my body from the injections as well. So I know it's horrible, and to think about that. And when you mentioned having your PhD sort of kept you going, like trying to get that done. I agree. Like I had a lot of like a mountain of things to do when I was going through my first treatment. I found that really helped me a lot, actually, because I had to get up. I had to get these things done. I had to try and find a place to live and sort of move internationally. That makes a big difference, I think. But as you say, when things are done, things sort of go downhill a lot because you don't have that reason to get up again.
So and then it reached a point where I wouldn't have been able to do those things. I had a certain momentum from when I was still healthy that was still going. As I put it in another interview with somebody else, that it was like running across the bridge and it was collapsing underneath me. And so there was a point at which I couldn't possibly have continued doing my PhD after I finished it. I couldn't, because at that point that was a transition phase for me anyway. I was supposed to be job hunting, I was about to be, and I could have been looking for jobs in Shanghai. That was where my field had the most growth. It was in China, so that most of the jobs were in China. And in academia, you have to follow the jobs. You don't get to pick where you live. The jobs are very, very highly sought after. So and it's a very stressful interview procedure and very nerve-wracking. So I was just incapable of doing that. So I lost my career. I finished my PhD, which is probably my proudest achievement given the circumstances. But then I didn't even go on to publish anything from my PhD. And I had been in complete denial about the fact that this MS diagnosis would affect my career. It was like the one thing I was working towards. It was something that really mattered to me, and I didn't think for a second that the physical symptoms would be quite as bad as they were, but they were. So once I had crashed,
it's very hard. I think, it's very hard to come to grips with that aspect of it. I think, like, for me, it was like the first 2 years was like I was always thinking, I'm going back, I'm just going to get this done, and I'm going back to my work, I'm going back to where I was before, and I'm going to continue, even though they kept telling me, it keeps coming back and that there's nothing you can do about it. I never had that until the second time I was diagnosed. So it was like Yeah, I completely agree. I think that part is probably one of the hardest sort of things to get your head around.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't really think about it. You just sort of, I was sort of taking it at that point in my life. This is what I have to deal with right now. But afterwards, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, this is the treatment. This is it. Once that's done, I'm gone. Like I'm going back to life.
Yeah.
So you don't. I never really thought about it long term how it was going to, until much later, how it's going to affect my life.
I mean, with MS, I mean, I personally, I would not that each condition is completely individual and can be different degrees of severity according to, it's hard to generalize, but I would say your situation was objectively worse than mine. I think blood cancer is much scarier, and it's you were told it was fatal. So, I don't know what that is like. I haven't been in that situation. What I would say that's different about a chronic illness like MS, and I'm not saying it's worse, it's just something different, is that there is no point at which you are going to recover, apparently. That is it. So it's not fatal, or at least, it's not generally fatal. You can have complications from it. But you're not looking at it as, maybe it shortens your expected lifespan, but it's not in itself a fatal disease.
But very much degenerative, though.
What's that? Degenerative.
It's very
yeah,
much
that's right.
degenerative, though. Yeah.
That's right. So you kind of sitting in this situation where you're like, I feel like death warmed up, and this is the best it's ever going to be, and this is it forever. This is it. And they tell you, these symptoms that you have, there's nothing you can take for them. You just have to learn to live with them, and it is just the end of your life as you knew it. And psychologically, knowing that or believing that is the case makes it difficult to deal with in the present. There's nothing to work towards. There's a sort of a sense of helplessness and hopelessness where you're not running for a cure. There's no moment at which you can hope for a cure. But as I say, I'm not saying that makes it worse than cancer. And it's just a slightly different nature.
No, well, I was in the same mindset too. Is it, when they keep telling you this is as good as it gets, it's only going to get worse. Like whereas before, when you building up your life, you're studying, you're building a business or anything like that, you're looking forward to the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when someone tells you like, okay, you got a degenerative disease, doesn't matter what it is. This is as good as get. It's only going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. Then you kind of think, well, what kind of future is there to look forward to? If it's only going to get worse. So it's a very negative prognosis, I think, when they start telling you things like that. And I understand why they do, because for the most case, it does happen that way because they have no idea about nutrition and things like that. But it puts you on a very negative path. So did you have trouble, do you think, after you finished your PhD, for example, and everything went downhill, do you think depression might have been a big part of that as well?
Oh, definitely. I was on antidepressants, and I'd never been on antidepressants in my life. I do have, I have had depressive episodes in the past, but I'd never, ever gone on antidepressants. But in this situation, I didn't see an alternative, and they did help me to some degree at the beginning. This was sort of around the time of my diagnosis. I have an anxious disposition, so I think more than anything it calmed my anxiety. But honestly, I didn't see any point in my life, and it was more like I was calmly planning I don't know. It was like less anxiously planning how I would exit the situation. It wasn't, I didn't see anything to live for, and I really was very, very depressed. And it was mainly because I was alone. That was what made it unbearable, because I felt abandoned, not just alone, and helpless to change that situation. I couldn't just go out and participate in activities and make new friends or get a job. I was helpless to change my circumstances, and my circumstances were that I was alone in this illness. And I think that's that was the hardest part of it. And I think that's partly because it was invisible from the outside. So the world is just so high paced. Everybody's so busy. And I found that if I wasn't investing in my friendships and relationships, they weren't there anymore. You know, the world didn't wait around. And I know that's a very common situation for many chronically ill people. I just didn't believe that would happen to me. I thought, well, I've got really relationships, loads of friends, you know.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think people just don't know how to handle someone else's illness. They don't know how to speak with them. They don't know how to talk or to be around them. So I think they just end up just avoiding being around there.
Yeah.
So
the hardest thing
that we deal with.
When people ask me, is it because you were terrible to be around at the time? That's the most hurtful question of all, because actually, as I said earlier, and I have no one to vouch for me for this really, but it's true. I was philosophically very positive about it. And it was the fact that no one stuck around, you know, when I'm feeling so unloved and feeling abandoned. I don't even like to talk about this actually, but it was then that I started to fall apart. It was after the abandonment, you know. I was so keen to just stay the same person that I was and prove to everybody, no, I'm still me. I can still go out to the pub. I can still, you know, I don't know. And in my experience, it was that people expected me to still function. So,
that's good.
yeah. And I mean, I had a variety of responses to what happened, but I think it was that there was certain amount of expectations in my relationships, and I think I was just the one investing. I didn't realize until it happened that I was the one investing most in my friendships and relationships. They just weren't, it wasn't. And so when I was not able to do that too, although I was so keen to, you know, the extra effort I would have to make to continue to socialize went unnoticed. And the things I fell short of didn't go unnoticed. So I just wasn't, it's hard to understand. It's hard to look back on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't. And I think partly, you know, when you have a condition like MS and it's invisible and people don't really understand it, then they're just like, well, you look fine.
What's wrong with you? So, you look fine.
It's obviously psychological, you know.
Yeah. I actually had a few of that myself, actually. People telling me, because I looked fine. I was fit and I was lean before I was diagnosed, so I looked fine. Even when I was going through treatment, even though I didn't have any hair, of course, but people would argue with me like, "What's wrong with you? Why can't you do this?" sort of things. And I'm like, well, I'm just going through treatments at the moment. You know, it's I just can't keep up with the things that I used to do. But you know,
that's shocking. I used to think, if I had cancer, people would take it seriously. I can't believe you've experienced that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, yeah. Unless I had Zomi with me or someone, actually I had that a few times and ended up in arguments with people because I was, they would expect me to do things that I just couldn't do at the time. Why I couldn't get up and get out and do things, but it's just, I don't know, people are, it's just the way people are. And unfortunately, you get good, you get bad, you get understanding, and most of it is ignorance, really. A lot of people that see you for a small glimpse of what's, of a part of your life, that they don't really see the whole picture. So they judge you on that,
And if they haven't experienced something like that, they can't relate.
Yeah, they just can't relate to that either. So how did you? What was when you were diagnosed? You just said before that you went on an extremely low-fat diet. Is that because of what you were advised to do?
Actually, nobody in a professional medical capacity ever talked to me about diet at all. I just obviously Googled, what do I do now that I've got MS? And I came across the Walls protocol, which everybody's heard of if if they have MS. Have you heard of Cerule? So she has reversed her MS on a particular diet, but I also came across the OMS diet. So there are two main diets that I came across to choose from, and they're quite different. And I chose OMS just because it was a bit more straightforward. The Walls protocol is slightly complicated. It's meat. It's a lot of meat, but it's also like berries and nuts and this and that. And it just sounded like my brain wasn't functioning properly. And I just thought, I can't compute this. I'll go for the more straightforward diet. So I went for the OMS diet, Overcoming Multiple Sclerosis, which is mainly vegan, except that it includes fish. But it also excludes saturated fat. So it's in some ways it's more strict than vegan, except that it includes fish. So you can't just have a processed vegan burger, for example. So it's eliminating sunflower oil, seed oils, so that there were good elements to that diet. I now look back and understand that there was some good elements. I was eating whole foods. I was just paying attention to what I was eating, which I never did before, because I never had a weight issue because I was so high energy. And I never really thought about nutrition and diet before. So following the OMS diet probably was a step up from my previous diet. But as I say, it just eliminated all saturated fats. And I found that I did look better on the diet, but I did not feel better. I didn't feel stronger. I didn't know that it was possible to have a diet that would make you feel stronger and feel healthier. I just thought, well, I'm just reducing the harm on my body, and it just gave me a small sense of control over what was happening. Yeah. But I as I said, didn't feel any different.
So what was your diet like before then? Before you were diagnosed, what was that like? Was it like a standard Western diet, or?
Yeah, carb heavy, very, very carb heavy. So, I would never really buy meat just because it was expensive. If I had meat, it would be if I was in a restaurant. So I was a meat eater, but I never really bought it. And I was
on a regular basis.
Like never. Like I don't think I'd ever bought a pack of bacon in my entire life. And I didn't. When I went carnivore, I remember standing at the meat counter in the supermarket and just being like, what do I do? What do I don't know. I don't know what any of it's called.
What do I get? So how did you find the carnivore diet then?
Well, so basically it's kind of a long story, but also not at all a long story. I ended up moving. I'll try and do it in a concise way. So basically, I had my first upturn in health before I started the diet. And that was because I discovered that there were also environmental factors in my condition. So I do think that these conditions are very, very complex, and that diet's the most fundamental thing that needs to be changed. But then, if the diet's not working for you, there could be other factors involved. And I found that my environment was one of those factors. So the city environment, and a lot of people don't like to have, a lot of people don't believe me on this, but I found that I was sensitive to wireless radiation and mobile phones, routers and Wi-Fi routers.
I don't think people understand. They don't really feel it because they're kind of numb, basically. But yeah, they do make a very big impact to lifestyle as well.
Yeah, like this was my mission before I came across the carnivore diet, was to try and spread the word about this. But I got nowhere, nothing but hostility, in fact. And so I just thought, you can't fight the tide. Everyone, I can't tell people to stop using their smartphones. It's not.
No, that's right.
And people don't want to hear that because everyone's addicted, like we all are. I am. It's not. So, but I discovered that living in the middle of Birmingham, I'd moved to Birmingham by that point, second biggest city in the UK, and surrounded by all, and not just Wi-Fi and radiation, but pollution and just the toxicity of the city, just the harsh environment of the city. But in particular, I realized that when I went to a wired connection and reduced my EMF exposure, I had a degree of functionability restored cognitively, but also a bit physically. So it was quite astonishing, really. And I used that, but not to the extent that I have found on the carnivore diet, I hasten to add. I was still very much affected by fatigue and brain fog, but I just went from non-functioning to functioning a little bit more. And then this happened to be at the time when the Brexit deadline was looming. So I kind of realized everything pointed to, I have to get out of the UK. The UK, I mean, this is a whole other topic, but the UK is a sinking ship. And because of Brexit, the escape routes were going to be closed. So, and I am a translator by profession. So my deepest desire was to get back into the workforce. I hated being out of work. I didn't know what my life, okay, my chance to have children had been taken away. That would have been wonderful, but at least let me have something to do. You know, if I'm not going to have that form of meaning in my life, at least let me have my career back that I've worked so hard. Anyway, so I thought if I don't move to Spain, I'll lose my foreign languages. I'll lose any chance of getting work, you know, and now Brexit's happening. And now I've discovered that I'm Wi-Fi sensitive. I have to live off grid. And in the UK, the weather's really awful. So you can't really do that. So I everything pointed to move to Spain right now before Brexit. And that's what I did. That's what I used. My degree of functioning that had been restored, I used to get myself out of the UK. So I sold my house and I bought a cabin up a mountain in Spain and in northern Spain, because when you have MS, you have heat intolerance. So I knew I couldn't be in the south of Spain. So everything just, my exit plan was suddenly very, very clear. And I just did it. And then when I got to the mountain, I spent 4 years there, basically rehabilitating from everything that had gone on in the UK. And when I say rehabilitating, I mean as much on a emotional and psychological level as on a physical level. And that I was there for the pandemic. So that was really good timing. It was unbelievable timing. It was literally, I was on the ferry on the way over and the first news reports about COVID were on the TV screens. I remember that. It was like 2 weeks before there was a very sudden lockdown in Spain. Because the epicenter in Europe was Italy. So they shut down Spain very, very soon. And it was very radical. So 2 weeks after I arrived.
That's
crazy.
Amazing time.
Yeah,
you must have known something was happening.
Yeah, well, I do think on some level something was going on. Just the sense of like, just go now. Like, and then I wasn't even registered at a local GP, at a family doctor during the pandemic. I wasn't on their radars whatsoever. So they didn't even call me in for any interventions. And so
I didn't have a GP for close to 5 years actually, because I just didn't trust them anymore.
Really?
Yeah. Right through the pandemic, before that even started, I never went to. I still see my oncologist, but I haven't had a GP for a very long time actually.
Yeah.
So that's worked out well.
Yeah. So eventually, though, I did go and sign up because I had a relapse of fatigue, which scared me a little bit. And I thought, well, there's probably, you know, who knows what's going to happen. I probably should have a neurologist. So I went and registered at a GP who then referred me to a neurologist because I don't have private health insurance. So I have to be referred. And then I went to see a neurologist. And he just wanted to put me straight back on medication. In fact, chemotherapy in tablet form. And I wanted none of it. After my experience in the UK, I wanted none of it. So I'm not his favorite patient because of that. He doesn't like the fact that I'm rejecting his medication. And he doesn't like at all the fact that I'm not ill. That boggles him. But what it doesn't trigger is curiosity. It just triggers defensiveness, you know.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are sort of waking up to that. I think the more stories I hear.
Yeah.
I am pretty lucky with my oncologist. He's pretty good. But yeah, generally speaking, like GPs, which is another reason why I don't have GPs, is they are so ingrained, like their education is so ingrained that we must be anomalies. There must be something wrong with us, because there's no way that they spent so many years studying and so much money studying that they could possibly be wrong. You know,
100.
Some of them are just like that. They can't come to terms with it.
Absolutely, it challenges their worldview, and as you say, everything that they've invested in their careers in. It's understandable, but when you have, I mean, one case is one
point.
But when you have
point.
so many, you know, it's like that there starts to be like a tide of evidence, and the more evidence there is, well, that becomes proof.
That's right.
That's
yeah. That's the biggest complaint I've had with most of these people, is that they make no real world observations. You know? These so-called fake studies, all these studies and things that come out, they mean nothing if they don't work in the real world. You know, so unfortunately, it's very difficult for people to actually look past their education and see what's actually happening.
Yeah.
And I can sort of understand that. I mean, it took me a long time to sort of come around, and you know, I was very fat phobic myself. I had a very low fat diet for most of my life, which I put down to well, you know, there's a lot of things. You know, growing up, my mother wanted to be vegetarian and all sorts of stuff. So, and my education as well was the same. Everything had to be low fat, lean meats and that sort of stuff. So, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons that led to my diagnosis. So, it's kind of difficult to get your head around sometimes. You don't realize just how much of this is, you know, it's just so wrong.
I was the same. Like when the first time I sat in front of a ribeye with a rind of beef, you know, the edge of beef, fat on it.
Yeah.
I was scared of it. I was scared to eat it. Like what? There's this sense of you shouldn't eat that. But I mean, I wasn't even doing it for weight loss reasons. But one of the first things I noticed was that the bloating, I had started to bloat a bit. You know, I've reached my 40s now. You can't really expect not to, or at least you can if you're carnivore. But the carb heavy diet starts to catch up with you.
It does.
Yeah, and I was starting to no longer fit into my clothes. I never weigh myself, but I was starting to no longer fit into the clothes I'd always worn in my 20s and early 30s. And the first thing I noticed was that I slimmed down, and from eating fat. And when you actually put that into practice and you see that, but you know, the main difference was not weight for me. The weight was not the issue. In fact, I didn't actually, when I started the diet, I didn't know this was going to happen at all. I didn't know it was possible.
Why did you start it then? If, I mean, you didn't know, was it just a hope, or was it just trying something different?
I've said this to quite a few people now, looking back, because it wasn't, I came across it, first of all, it was while I was on the mountain that I came across it. So I had rehabilitated to some degree, but I was still impacted by fatigue. So I wasn't working, I wasn't socializing without a fatigue payback. And I wasn't really my best self still. I very much not my best self, but I'd got myself into a relationship, my first in many years, because of my illness. And I think it was just having the kind of the shock of having somebody around all the time, you know, on an intimate level. I was like, I need to sort myself out here. You know, I had forgotten what it was like to be in a relationship. So I think I was probably propelled to start the diet just for self-improvement, if that makes sense, but not really because of my MS. I don't recall watching anything that made me think it could cure my MS, but it was within a month. I mean, so I'd seen my first carnivore video a year before I started the diet, and it was Kelly Hogan. So that was in a weight loss context, and she just looks so healthy and so great, you know. And I was really struck by her story, I do remember that. That was that's the one video I do remember that made a big impact on me. And then YouTube just started suggesting more. So it's possible I did see things that talked about autoimmune diseases, but I don't remember being heavily invested in this is going to cure me. I remember just thinking let's just try this and see if the bloating goes down, see if, I don't know, if I just start to be a better person. I don't know. I just decided to do it one day, and I decided to vlog it as well. So honestly, I couldn't have been more surprised when 30 days in, my memory came back, my core strength had returned, my energy had returned, my anxiety had reduced, the spots on my chin that I'd had ever since enforced mask wearing in the pandemic had gone away. You know, I just saw all of these changes, and my partner, he's now my ex, but my partner at the time confirmed this. He saw the same. And it was the memory and the core strength. So it was almost like I came across it by accident and cured my MS by accident.
Yeah.
That's almost
incredible.
Yeah.
Just in 30 days, that's a dramatic turnaround, isn't it?
Yes. And it's continued to build ever since, because, you know, there's also an element of confidence, getting my confidence back in my physical abilities, my career. And, you know, so there's been an ongoing upward trajectory since then. Yeah,
that's fantastic. That's really great. Yeah, I agree. I feel the same way, actually. The mental clarity, the brain fog, and the memory coming back, and it seems to be increasingly just on the upward trajectory, and just it's a very positive feeling, and when you've come like yourself, you've been diagnosed with something that's degenerative, to go from an outlook of everything's going to get worse and worse and worse to feeling like everything's going to get better and better and better. Like, it's a complete opposite turnaround. It's an incredible feeling. Yeah.
It really, really is, you know, but it's also easy to forget how bad you were. You know, it's hard to believe how bad my fatigue was. You know, I was on my hands and knees in the shower, and I would have to rest for an hour after I had a shower because it was so exhausting. You know, that seems unbelievable. How could I have been living like that? Now I can just get up in the morning and do stuff.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's amazing.
You've had it taken away. It really is incredible. I
do tell people that you forget pain, you know. Even though, like, when you're going through it, and it feels like, and sometimes it can be for years, even though, you know, at the time it feels like it's never going to end. When you get past it, you forget the pain. You know, you forget the time, and you realize every now and then you'll think about it and you think, wow, I don't know how I really got through all that. But the physical pain itself, you forget completely, you know. Yeah. So I think that's wonderful.
I feel like I'm better. I feel like I probably am better now because I experienced that. I say better, but I mean, I appreciate it more.
Yeah.
Because of what I experienced. Like, my memories of those years when I was at my worst are very hazy. It's like one blur. I know the facts of what my life was during that time, but I don't remember the extreme length of duration that I experienced it as being. You know, it's just a blur.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. Like, especially the worst parts of treatment, most of that was very much a blur because it's like I wasn't awake for most of it as well.
Right.
But even when I was awake, there was no concentration skills. I couldn't think about it. I couldn't do anything anyway.
Yeah.
So, like, I know the facts of what happened and what was happening throughout that purely from stories from my wife. But apart from that, I don't really remember exact details or exactly how I felt. You know, I knew I did, except that there is that. I do remember how frustrating it was, because it was very frustrating not to be able to get up, to get off the lounge or to get off the bed and to do things. That part was very frustrating.
Yeah.
So, So how did you? So when you started carnivore and you started noticing all these improvements, how did that help your emotional health?
I mean, I just think, well, it's this feeling of a miracle of being able to enjoy your life again is the nicest thing about it, you know, and to just have your time back, you know. But it's also maybe more resilient, I would say. Like that core strength that I was talking about is physical, but it's also emotional, it's mental as well. Like when you are extremely ill and you're extremely debilitated, it's harder to take things like perceived abandonment or judgments. You know, it's that's why it's particularly cruel to I think not support sick people, because it's harder for them to deal with the emotional fallout of that lack of support. So I found that my resilience has returned. So I, you know, going back into the world, participating in the world again hasn't been easy. Like I've come up against a whole load of difficult interpersonal relationship issues. You know, it's coming back into the world means coming back into the world good, bad and ugly. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not an easy world to live in. And I very much had run-ins, you know, just as a nothing to do with my MS or being a sick person, but just it's just been hard. The world didn't welcome me back, you know, oh, welcome back, you're no. So and what I found is that the emotional resilience is there, and the ability to, it's not always that easy, but it's just real life, normal real life, if that makes sense, healthy real life. And
I think coming back gives you a different sense of perspective. You know, when you know people always have disagreements and they always have their own opinion and that sort of stuff. And that's all good. It doesn't really matter. But when you start having confrontations and things like that, I think after a situation like, I just don't care. I just whatever. I switch off. You know. You have a much better perspective on what really matters to you and what is really important, what is going to affect you or not.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's been easier to kind of it's hard to talk about in some ways, because you know the amount of trauma that happened during those ill years, that trauma can get re-triggered if you haven't healed it, and I'm still in the process of healing it. So but it's fundamentally more optimistic, the whole situation. I feel like, okay, maybe it's going to take me a little bit longer to work through these things. I'm clearly still getting triggered on these particular issues, you know, but it's I don't sweat it so much, because I just feel like, well, I can just I can distract myself, I can build new relationships. I haven't found it easy coming back into the world, I have to say, but I do feel fundamentally stronger and more able to just weather it. And as you say, put it in perspective, like because it's easy to forget how ill you were. And then all I have to do is remind myself and think, stop stressing over small stuff like this. You're having a rubbish time right now because you're living a life in the world, you know, not something to celebrate. And there's always that level of, wow, I'm living a life, you know, which is really precious, because really we should all feel that way all the time, because life is precious, you know, and we should.
But unfortunately, it's very easy to take for granted as well. Like you say, we forget where we come from as well. I'm the same. You know, I have my days like that, and I think, you know, things start to get to me because you're trying to get it back out into the real world, and things aren't going the way you want them to go, and so it gets a little bit frustrating. Then you think about, well, how much does it really matter? You know, how much does it really matter?
Yeah.
like you said, I feel like we're both in exactly the same situation where, like, with follicular lymphoma, it's like every blood test is it, you know, it could be back now, it could be back again. So it's always sort of in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
You know, will I have a relapse?
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing that it's kind of a negative, but also a positive, because it also keeps things in perspective for you as well. Because
Yeah.
you know, it also keeps you on track. You know, like I stick to the carnivore diet because I don't want to relapse. You know,
Yes.
so I do these things so that things don't get worse again.
Yeah.
Which is a great motivator.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also has a negative thing, like, you know, every now and then you think it gets you down, you think, yeah, it might come back again. But it also puts the bad stuff coming back out into the world, like you said, into perspective as well. Like,
Yeah.
who really cares what other people think? You know, like, other people's opinions just don't matter that much, and it's I'm certainly much stronger for it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think in a lot of ways, I'm very much blessed. It was a challenge, and I put it down to being a challenge. And like yourself, we rose to the challenge, and we're beating it.
Yeah. And it's possible. Who knew?
It is possible. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Who knew? You know, when you get most people. Actually, I was recently I was actually booted from a Facebook group on talking about cancer because my posts were too positive.
What?
I was talking. Yeah, they literally said that the post that they think that I have an ulterior motive because everyone here has already got cancer and is dying. So your post about preventing it is not helping anyone. It's just making it worse. That was the reason why they booted me. So yeah, it's just
that's shocking.
That's
like,
the thing. Yeah, that's some of the things I deal with. But you know, it's just for most people, when they hear the diagnosis, the big C or big MS, that's it. Their life is over. You know, that's the end of it. They can't get out of that negative mindset.
Yeah.
So it's really good that you have a story like yours, and we can show people that there is something you can do about it. You know, it's not a bad diagnosis. Is not the end of the world. You know.
Yeah, and in fact, it can be a positive, because if it leads to you making changes that are fundamentally better for your health, and you manage to kick the condition, then you're in a better situation going forward than you were before you even got ill.
Yeah, that's right.
I feel so passionate about spreading the word, because, you know, one thing I really hate, I was in Morocco a year ago, actually, not long after I started the diet. I went to Morocco and I bumped into a woman in an underground car park who was coming down in the lift, and she was pushed out in a wheelchair by her husband, and they were talking in French, and I heard them say multiple sclerosis in French, and I went straight over to them and said, my French is a bit patchy, but I speak French and Spanish anyway. But I was like, oh, I have multiple sclerosis as well. And I'd only recently started the diet, and she was walking she was being wheeled to the car by her husband. And so I was like, I had like 30 seconds to get the information to her. You know, she was like, how do you have MS? And she said, were you like me? And I said, yes, I was using a wheelchair. Yes, she was isolated. She was in floods of tears. She couldn't stop hugging me. And just because I gave her validation I said, look, I'm so sorry what you're going through. You know, I understand what you're going through. And she couldn't stop clinging on to me, hugging me. So it was very, very intense. But anyway, I did everything I could to just say, look, I've changed my environment. I've moved to the countryside. I've changed my diet, only meat, no sugar, just this is what's happened. This is how I've got to the place where, and that will never leave me, because this woman was absolutely destroyed. You know, she was absolutely in floods of tears. Like, she was so traumatized, she was so ill, and I just thought, you know, this isn't right. This information, even if it doesn't work for everyone, I don't know, but at least if people can have the information that it has worked for so many people, maybe they'll give it a try, and then maybe they won't have their lives ruined anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Yeah,
people's lives are ruined.
That's right. Well, they are. Their lives are being ruined. You know, think how many people have not had this information and could have lived a much longer life.
Yeah.
It's a horrible thing, really, when it comes down to the way we've been educated and propagandas and just basically, you know, the food that we've been weaned on for the last 100 years from corporations and things like that, that it's all about calories and, you know, don't eat, always either stick to a low fat diet, which is obviously killing us, you know. And people are still stuck in it because it's really difficult for people to understand. We're brought up to trust people in white coats, you know, beyond all else.
Absolutely.
Beyond even our own feelings, like how we feel.
Yeah.
You know?
And ultimately, we're trusting big corporations.
That's right. Exactly. Because these people work for big corporations. That's basically all they are. Like pharmaceutical sales reps, and these are the same people that are making these foods that are so addictive that they use these scientists to do that, you know.
Yeah.
But because they're so educated, we're all like, okay, they must know what they're talking about, and they must be beyond reproach, you know. They're all good people.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can buy a scientist just as much as you can buy a politician. So
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's just we tend not to want to believe that there is real evil out there, unfortunately. But that's the way it is.
I agree.
And
I don't think it's being negative, looking at the world in that way. I don't experience that as a negative. I experience that as, okay, I need to work around this. I need to find my own way. That's a positive thing. That's taking control of your life and not following.
This is the thing too. This is the biggest message I want for people, is to think about taking control of their own health.
Yeah.
So that they can be independent. You know.
Yeah.
I don't want people to be dependent on pharmaceuticals, on hospitals and doctors and things like that, because once you're in the system, it's very, very difficult to get out of it again. I know. And it's very degrading. You have absolutely zero privacy, and all sorts of other problems. But apart from that, it's just a wonderful feeling to be independent and healthy again, you know.
Definitely.
So this is why I want to get the message out as much as I can, because people don't understand that they can be independent, they can take charge, and they can. It's not that difficult to understand how to take control of your own health. You know, it's really not that difficult.
It's difficult. It's only difficult because of the layers of corruption or manipulation that are around.
Yes,
simple steps to take, but they're hard to find, because I remember walking into a grocery store not long after I'd started the diet and kind of been deprogrammed a little bit, you know, and stepping into a grocery store, and it looked like a cartoon. I realized everything is sugar-based here, and all the packaging, it's like a cartoon. This isn't food. This is like a video game. This isn't, you know, it was like I'd been deprogrammed on a food level by that point. And now I look at, you know, it's the meat counter that I'm interested in.
Leading to probably my next question actually was going to be, now you said before, it's not just about your diet, it's about the way your lifestyle. So I was wondering, what are your life hacks now for, you know, keeping yourself in remission and just being healthy again?
Well, my main life hack is the diet and living in nature. That's that's the two biggest structural changes that I have made that have, I believe, led to me overcoming multiple sclerosis. I don't even think of myself as being in remission, to be honest. I don't think about having MS at all. So, but I know not everybody is as lucky as me in that I wasn't that far advanced. There are many people who are very advanced in the disease who maybe don't see the same results. I don't know. It's really hard to talk about generalizations, but really it's for MS anyway, it's reducing stress, purifying your environment, and being mindful of what you put in your body. I think that's the key. I mean, I'm really hesitant to give medical advice and to I want to spread the word, but I don't want to be irresponsible because I'm not medically trained. And also I know that other people have different experiences, and it's not one size fits all necessarily. So, but that's for me what has absolutely worked. I was in a horrible situation. I was using a wheelchair. I had no life. I could barely hold conversations. And by changing my environment, reducing my stress, and changing my diet, things came back into my control. So, and the diet, I mean, I think I made this point earlier, the diet is a fundamental element of a step to take. You cannot, I don't believe you can hope to address a chronic condition if you don't address your diet. But then it just sort of unleashes a journey of healing, which becomes uphill rather than struggling, fighting fires. And among those, that sort of onward progression towards health, I have found that other bad habits that I used to have been revealed to me. So by cutting out sugar and maybe gluten, maybe sugar and gluten were both a problem, I don't know, which are eliminated by the carnivore diet. I realized that I have a very high caffeine consumption, and also that I smoke too much marijuana. I've been using that medicinally for years. So it highlighted that because my body was no longer dealing with these other elements, that kind of laid bare my other habits, which were perhaps now not so helpful to me. So it's an ongoing process. But the life hack is the diet. It's the proper human food. So
I agree. Yeah, I agree. A lot of that is, lifestyle plays a very big part for, I think, the first thing people should sort of focus on is their diet, because that brings out a lot of bad habits that we all have, or we all had. But yeah, I talk about that quite often too. Being in touch with nature is really important. I think grounding, getting sunlight, being your body clock ready for the circadian rhythm. It's so important. It's one of those things. Again, these are things that are demonized, that are absolutely essential for life. Such as light, being out in the sun, and enjoying the sun. So for like the last 100 years, people have been scared to go out in the sun.
I know. Sorry, I'm going to revise my life hack. My life hack is do not believe anything you hear, because this world is topsy-turvy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, everything's backwards. Yeah.
Everything's backwards. You've got to think for yourself. You've got to listen to your body. Really listen to it, because your body doesn't lie. Your body tells you the truth about the state it's in, and the strength that you have. And maybe there's, I don't know, maybe we're all walking into a heart attack. I have no idea. That's what we would be. That's what people would tell us.
Well, that's what they keep telling. I mean, but there's absolutely no literature at all, or no proof or anything that saturated fat at all, or meat has anything to do with heart disease. So it's plus honestly, for me, it was like, if a heart attack would be a much better scenario for me.
I would rather have a heart attack than go through more years of chemotherapy, you know. So
definitely, this is the way I look at it. I think, you know, given that I now have a life to live, well, great. So if it ends in a heart attack, I had a great life. You know, I can do things. I have my strength. I have my cognitive capacity. You know, and I also I think, you know, there's many lifestyle factors in having heart disease, or you know, being overweight, smoking, you know, what have you. And if all of those are not in the picture, and cholesterol is manufactured by the body, and we need it for our brains. And for our hormones and for all these things that cholesterol is so important for, then why is it now prohibited? And the same with vitamin D. You know, I never put on sunblock. I don't actually trust that at all. And I go out and I get as much sun as possible. And that definitely has, I forgot to mention that earlier, but yeah, absolutely. Like, that's another hack. Get vitamin D. It's like, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing that people don't understand too, is that D3 is a hormone. It's also a pre-hormone that, you know, is produced from our cholesterol. You know, it also, it is. It's a pre-hormone that produced from our cholesterol, and it's one way to for your body to stimulate the D3 production. You go out in the sun, it produces more D3 that comes out to the skin and acts like our sunscreen, you know. And it also, as a pre-hormone, it's also very good for producing more testosterone, and of course for women that gets turned into estrogen through the ovaries. So just generally speaking, for hormone production, you need sunlight for stimulation, and you need fat for you need the cholesterol production. So any kind of drug that reduces cholesterol is just absolutely is suicide for me, or anyone. I think, you know, it's detrimental to the brain, the heart, and for your hormone production. So it's crazy. Yeah, it really is.
It is crazy. What is happening?
Have you noticed that you enjoy the sun more since you've been on the carnivore diet?
Well, I've always enjoyed the sun. I'm British. All Brits are desperate for a little bit of sun once a year.
It's something that I've noticed. A lot of carnivores that they don't complain about sunburn so much anymore, and it's something I've noticed myself. Is I used to be, especially after chemotherapy, well, I could literally get sunburn in the living room if I opened the curtains. But now I can literally spend all day out in the sun and not get burnt.
I mean, I suppose I have noticed that. I have very pale skin, but I don't actually burn that quickly. I don't tan, but I don't burn that quickly either. Don't know why. But I'm in hotter sun than I normally am, or what I was when I was living in the UK, and I'm out much of the day, walking the dogs in the land, you know. And I'm barely. I'm barely. Nothing's really happening. I look healthier when I've been in the sun, but that's it. But I haven't burnt at all this summer. Or last summer. Last summer, when I first started the diet, I was in Morocco like a few weeks after I started, 2 weeks after starting the diet. I went out to Morocco to meet my then partner. That's a long story, but we're in very, very hot weather there, you know, in sort of close to the desert, you know, and I didn't put sunblock on then either. And I've heard from other carnivores that the reason, I've no idea if it's true, but I've heard that the reason that non-carnivores burn quicker is because of the seed oils.
Oh, absolutely.
Is it that?
Yeah, I think definitely, because I mean, our bodies are designed to absorb fat through the lymphatic system. You know, we've got 5 major organs all designed to absorb fat. The liver being the biggest organ designed to absorb fat. But when they're absorbing seed oils, these are like a toxic poison to them, so like to these organs. So you know, you get a lot of dysfunction. You get
your hormones are not functioning properly, you're basically malnourished. So if you're not producing D3, you're not getting that sunscreen. And at least people are finding the carnivore diet through stories like ours, and hopefully we can do something about it. We can change it around a bit.
I think the window of opportunity is not very wide open because
Not yet.
I just saw today a YouTube video about a homesteader who it wasn't even the carnivore diet, but it was talking about plants that can help, like mints that can help settle your stomach and things like that, and had the videos taken down from YouTube for medical misinformation.
Well, that's good.
Just herbs. I don't think we've got, I think, channels like yours that are actively like putting this, cause I say yours rather than mine, because my channel's a bit more of a personal blog, I would say, that's just documenting my case. For what that's worth, that's something. But I think what you're doing is you're actually putting the science out there, and you're interviewing other carnivores. You're working really hard to push that information out there. And I think that it's really important, because sooner or later, YouTube's going to come for the carnivores.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We're sort of preparing for that too. So luckily we have other platforms, but it's unfortunately it's still, YouTube is still the biggest platform. So it makes sense to keep going with it,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what does, what does a week of eating look like for you now?
Well, I would say that I have like a daily normal sort of go-to, which is a pack of bacon and 4 eggs at 11 o'clock, because I stick to the fasting regimes. I found that to be really, really important in getting the best out of the diet, to get, for your body to digest the nutrition that you've put into it. So 11 o'clock, whole pack of bacon, 4 eggs, and then around 5-6 p.m. I usually have a large quantity of minced beef, ground beef, or ribeye steaks. Or the other day I bought a pack of lamb just to have something different. So just a large quantity of ruminant meat.
Yeah, good fatty ruminant meat.
Yeah. And actually, I've only recently started to really actively seek out fatty cuts. It wasn't that I suppose I did have to deprogram myself a little bit. I think we discussed this earlier, where the first time I had like a big fatty rind in front of me, I was like, oh, shouldn't eat that. But now I'm actively enjoying that's delicious, like lovely crispy fat is absolutely delicious. So I'm sort of more actively, staying away from chicken recently, for example, because I would switch it up a bit and have chicken once in a while, but I've come to understand that you need the fatty meat, and that's what fills you up. So I try and seek out as much fat as possible, and I've started licking my plates.
That's good, isn't it? It's amazing. We're so programmed with the low fat sort of diets that I think we also convince ourselves that we just don't like the fat. I was fat phobic myself. I was always I would cut the fat off the steaks and I'd push it aside, sort of thing. And it used to make me angry that I couldn't find a lean steak, sort of thing. I ate a whole lot of chicken breast. So I don't eat chicken at all anymore. So it's a big change.
Yeah.
But once you get your head around it, it's all good. It feels so good. It's so satiating.
You lose fat.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, eat fat to get slim.
Absolutely.
Actually, there was a book that came out in 1958. It's called Eat Fat, Get Slim, I think it's called.
Right.
But very good. Yeah, actually. Okay, so fasting, you mentioned. How often do you fast? Do you do long fast, or do you do intermittent fasting?
No, I'm doing intermittent fasting at the moment. I haven't actually found the bravery, I suppose, to do a longer fast. I think, but what I found is I actively enjoy the intermittent fasting. So I would be open to doing longer fasts, experimenting with that. as part of a health practice. But at the moment, I'm just sticking to the intermittent fasting. So 16, 8. 8 hours where I eat, 16 hours where I fast. But you're sleeping for half of that. It's really no hardship.
Yeah, it's not very difficult, is it?
Cycle. It feels very normal. It just feels like, okay.
Yeah, but that's a healthy way to do it, though, too. A good 8-hour window for food and like 2 meals a day. That's pretty much all I stick to as well. Two meals a day. I have started doing some longer fast again. I did through treatments. I did long fast, but that wasn't really through choice. But now I do 3 or 4 day fast every now and then. But that feels really good. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But so your condition now, are you on any kind of medications to maintain at all?
Nothing.
Excellent. Very good.
Yeah. I'm quite proud of the fact that I'm 44 years old and I'm on no prescriptions whatsoever. I think for many people, it's an achievement in itself, let alone with MS. But I don't take any drugs of any kind, not even marijuana anymore.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well,
so you've gone from, literally, you've gone from being stuck in a wheelchair to healthy, vibrant, and zero medications. That's incredible.
Yeah. Absolutely. I never ever thought it was going to be possible. I didn't even have the hope. I didn't think it was something I could hope for.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
Do you take any medications?
No, I'm on zero medications. Yeah. I haven't been on any medications now for a couple of years. So it's it's to be able to say, like at my age, like I'm 51 now,
right.
Zero medications after so many years of treatments. It's an incredible feeling. It really is. This is why I keep saying it's that independence feeling from pharmaceuticals that it's incredible.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can get more people to feel that independence, if they just take a bit more responsibility with what they eat.
Yeah.
But of course, that all comes down to informed consent too. I think a lot of it just is, like you said before, it's very difficult to get the information. It's very muddy water, and most people just have no idea what they are eating.
Yeah. 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 It's tricky. It is tricky territory to be in. However, because there's the desire to spread the word, but there's also the desire for people to make their own decisions, which is precisely the point. So it completely defeats the object if I were to go around telling everybody you must do this. This is how you're going to. It's not. The whole point is there should be no coercion in medicine. There should be no. And everyone should have access to information to make their own decisions.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there should be no coercion in medicine or diet. And they should have the information that they need to make the best choices for themselves. And that's, I mean, like you said, I try to get as much of the science out there as possible. I speak to as many doctors and as many experiences themselves just to show people that this is the information.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's really up to the individual whether they take it on board.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people think that it takes some like a certain type of bravery to change their diet or something. But it really, even if you just do it for 3 months, 3 months is a very short time to change your life. And if it doesn't work for you, it's very easy to go back.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, I really wonder, as I said, I really, really wonder if I'd known about this as a potential option back in 2017 when I was, about to lose my career and my entire life as I knew it. If I'd just had that information at that point in time, would I still be in my career? Would I, and I didn't have the information, and it wouldn't have been a massive leap. It wouldn't have, what I did in the end was to move up a mountain in Spain. That's how desperate I became. And that's a much bigger risk than choosing to eat only meat for 30 days.
Yeah.
It was
absolutely.
It led to
That
that
must have
event.
been pretty exciting, though.
Oh yeah. Well, I just thought, look, if I'm going to be isolated in my hometown, in the biggest city in England, like where I live, and I know so many people, if I'm isolated here, what difference does it make if I'm isolated up a mountain? And then at least I've got lovely views.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so that was the thinking behind it. And it was a wonderful experience, you know, and I'm so glad I did do it. But as I say, I wonder whether I would have felt the need to do it if I'd heard about the carnivore diet, which would have just been a simple choice of what to eat. It's not,
Yeah.
I don't consider that brave. I consider that lucky to have come across the information, because that information is held from us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't take a large degree of bravery to take on a new diet and just to make a few simple changes. And it doesn't have to be the rest of your life either if you don't really see it that way. But yeah,
I mean, I think what's brave is thinking independently from the advice you are given from whatever platforms or medical professionals may be giving you that advice. That I think does take a degree of bravery, but that's also just a case of listening to your body and allowing your body to be your main authority.
Yeah.
And not worrying about people's reactions or
that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, there comes a point where in your life you just have to go against the grain. Like, everyone around you sometimes will have a different opinion. Sometimes you just have to listen to your own and follow how you feel, you know. And I think you're living proof of that. You know, you've had everyone around you tell you that this is a degenerative disease, that this is as good as it gets, but obviously you've turned that around by doing exactly the opposite. You know?
Well, you're the same, and that's what makes it hold weight, because my neurologist would just say, well, you're just an individual case that I can't explain, and I can discard you because you're just one individual case that I can't explain. But the more people who are coming out and saying, hold on a minute, this has worked for me as well, it starts to be something that's harder to ignore. Yeah,
that's right. Exactly. Because there are so many stories, and it's not just in one particular illness or condition. It's broad, you know, all disease, really. There have been people from, you know, diabetes, obesity, cancer, and many other things that, and of course MS, but incredible stories, and thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands. So it's like, it's a real world observation that unfortunately academia and hospitals don't want to know about just yet. But hopefully we can turn that around.
Hopefully. I really hope so.
Yeah. So in closing up, what would be your advice to anyone who is going through a tough time and can't see a way out and haven't tried the carnivore diet yet?
I mean, my heart goes out to anybody in that situation. You know, the first thing I'd want to do is just say, you're not alone. You are not alone in this. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people out there are struggling with this type of situation. And equally, thousands and thousands of people have come through a similar situation. So don't lose that optimism. Don't lose that hope. And have faith in yourself and in your own mind and in your own body. And I would, you know, again, it's like, I don't want to say what to do, but I would urge people to be experimental. Be experimental.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, be experimental. Try new things. Try anything. I mean, like you said, we can't really give medical advice, but we can show you, like, this has worked for us. And the one thing I would say is to just get rid of processed foods, whether you like
meat
Yeah.
or vegetables. Just get rid of processed foods, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Well, you know, again, Rebecca, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time, especially as this had to be again from yesterday because of technical issues, which I seem to be having again. It's all good. Yeah, but I really, really appreciate you taking the time. It's been great talking to you. Hopefully we can talk again soon, and I really wish all the best for you.
Thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed our conversation. Really, very much.